We were just two little girls turning 10, flying high for the first time. Our father promised the skies would be ours for the day. First-class seats, birthday cupcakes, a view above the clouds. Everything felt magical. But the moment we stepped onto that plane, a woman in uniform looked at us like we didn't belong. She didn't ask our names, she didn't check our tickets, she just blocked our way and said, "These seats aren't for you." That was when the magic began to unravel, and when the world showed us what it really thought of little black girls who dared to dream big. I woke up to the sound of birds outside my window and the smell of something sweet drifting from the kitchen. For a second, I forgot it was our birthday. Then I opened my eyes and saw the glittering banner above our bed. Happy 10th birthday, Chloe and Zoe. That's when it hit me. Today was the day. The day we flew, for real, for the first time. Zoe was already sitting cross-legged on the bed beside me, her sketch pad in her lap, drawing something with quick, sure strokes. "It's us," she whispered, smiling. "On the plane." I stretched and peeked over her shoulder. She'd drawn us in matching jumpsuits, mine with stars, hers with clouds. And in the background was a big, beautiful airplane soaring through a sky filled with cake-shaped clouds. It was dreamy, just like everything Zoe imagined. Dad said today would be magical. He said we'd fly above the clouds like queens, that the whole sky would be our playground. And for once, it wasn't just a story. We were really doing it. First-class tickets to New York City. Just us three. Downstairs, Dad was already moving around the kitchen. Our house wasn't loud, even when we were excited. It was peaceful. Big windows, white walls, plants in every corner. Zoe said it looked like a museum. I said it felt like home. "Birthday girls," Dad called, his voice warm and low like morning coffee. "You better not come down here unless you're ready to be spoiled." We raced down barefoot, nearly sliding into the marble counter. And there it was. Waffles, berries, whipped cream, orange juice in fancy glasses, and a little cake with 10 candles in the middle of the table. "I wanted to save the cake for tonight," Dad said. "But your mom used to say breakfast cake tastes better on birthdays." Zoe and I exchanged a glance. Our smiles dropped just a little, but only for a second. We didn't talk about Mom much, but she was everywhere. Her pictures on the wall, the music Dad still played when he cooked, the quiet way he looked at the sky sometimes, like waiting for something. "She'd be proud of us," I said softly. "Especially you," Zoe added. "You finally stopped biting your nails." Dad chuckled and set 2 small boxes in front of us. "You'll need these for today." Inside were matching silver bracelets. Engraved inside mine, "The sky is yours." Inside Zoe's, "Dream higher than the clouds." We didn't say anything, just hugged him tight. His shirt smelled like cinnamon and something clean. "All right," he said, clearing his throat. "Time to get dressed. I've laid out your outfits on the bed. No arguments. I had help picking them." That made Zoe groan. Dad's idea of fashion usually meant a lot of beige. But when we got back to the room, we found 2 travel jumpsuits. Mine navy with tiny constellations, hers white with watercolor clouds. Cool, actually cool. By the time we were ready, the car was already waiting. Not just any car. A sleek black sedan with seats that smelled like new leather and a driver who opened the door like we were royalty. "Is this what rich people do?" Zoe whispered as we slid in. "I think we might be rich," I whispered back. She giggled. "Then I want a dragon." The ride to the airport felt like a movie. We passed palm trees, traffic, tall glass buildings, then pulled up to a special entrance. Not the usual place with long lines and crowds. This one was quiet, elegant. The sign read, "First class private check-in." My heart beat faster. Everything was smooth. They called Dad Mr. Miles and handed him things with both hands, like he was a king. Nobody looked rushed. Nobody looked annoyed. Just calm voices, gentle smiles. We went through security in less than 5 minutes. Zoe kept whispering, This can't be real. Are we dreaming? Then we entered the first-class lounge. It was like a secret clubhouse for grown-ups with soft chairs, real food, not just snacks, and huge windows overlooking the planes. Zoe ran to the window, sketchbook already open. "That's an A380, she shouted. "That's ours." She was right. Dad had shown us pictures the night before. The big double-decker, the gentle giant of the sky, he'd called it. I sank into a chair and looked around. Everyone else seemed older, quieter, dressed in suits or expensive-looking scarves. Some looked at us, not mean, just curious. But one woman near the juice bar actually frowned. I pretended not to notice. Zoe did. "They don't think we belong here," she said quietly. "They don't know who we are," I answered. "Who are we?" I smiled. "We're Chloe and Zoe Miles. Birthday girls, sky travelers, dreamers." Dad came back with smoothies. "Boarding in 15, he said. "And remember the rule." Zoe and I recited in unison. "Don't tell anyone we own the plane." We all laughed. It was true, kind of. Dad didn't say much about his job, but we knew enough. He helped design planes, then bought the airline, Starlight Airways. That was his. Ours too, I guess, but he never showed off, never acted like a big deal. Still, today was special. Today, we were flying as passengers, not owners. No one on board would know who we were, and that's exactly how Dad wanted it. The announcement came. We packed our things. Zoe hugged her sketch pad like a teddy bear. I fixed my bracelet. Dad held both our hands. "You ready, my little stars?" he asked. "Ready," we squealed. As we walked down the jet bridge, the butterflies in my stomach turned into full-blown fireworks. This was it, the start of something we'd remember forever. At least that's what we thought. The jet bridge smelled like new carpet and metal and something I couldn't name. Maybe the scent of flying dreams. My heart was still dancing in my chest. Zoe squeezed my hand tighter with every step. We were here. This was happening. But the second we reached the aircraft door, everything paused. She stood there like a wall, arms crossed, mouth tight, eyes cold. Her uniform was crisp, her name tag polished, and her smile, a very fake one, vanished the moment she saw us. "Hold it," she said. Zoe and I stopped mid-step. Dad was just behind us. "Good morning," he said warmly, holding out our boarding passes. "We're in seats 2A, 2B, and 2C. She didn't take them. Her eyes darted between our faces, lingering on our hair, our skin, our clothes. Then she looked behind us, like she was expecting someone else to appear. Someone more believable. "This is the first-class cabin," she said slowly, like we didn't speak English. Dad didn't flinch. "Yes, these are our seats." The woman's name tag said Karen Redford, and something about the way she stood made me feel small. Not because I was a kid, but because it felt like she'd already decided we didn't belong. Zoe looked up at me, confused. "Did we do something wrong?" she whispered. I didn't know how to answer. Karen still hadn't touched the passes. Instead, she tilted her head at us, eyes narrowing. "I'll need to verify these. A lot of people try to sneak into this cabin," she said. Sneak? Dad stayed calm. "You're welcome to verify them." She took the boarding passes with only 2 fingers, like they were dirty. Then she squinted at them as if expecting to find invisible ink. "And I'll need the credit card used for purchase, as well as photo ID." My stomach dropped. That wasn't normal. We'd flown before in economy. No one had ever asked for a credit card at the door. "That's not protocol," Dad said, still measured. "But here you go." He handed over his black metal card and ID. Karen's eyebrows rose for half a second when she saw the card. But then her expression hardened again. She returned them like we were wasting her time. "I still don't think this is going to work," she muttered. Zoe's lip trembled. I pulled her closer. "What exactly won't work?" Dad asked, his voice even sharper now. Karen gestured vaguely toward the cabin behind her. This is a quiet zone, premium experience. Children can be disruptive. You might be more comfortable elsewhere. Somewhere else. Somewhere lower. Somewhere meant for us. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. My cheeks burned. I wasn't sure if I was mad or embarrassed or sad or all three. I looked around. A few passengers in nearby seats were watching. Some looked away quickly. One woman shook her head disapprovingly, like we were causing trouble. I wanted to disappear. And then I saw him. A man across the aisle in seat 3A, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and glasses. He was staring, not at us, but at Karen. His brow was furrowed, mouth tight, like he recognized something ugly and didn't like it. For a second, our eyes met. Then he nodded, just a little. It didn't mean much then, but later, I'd remember that nod. "I'm asking you one more time," Dad said, his voice low but firm. "Please let us board. My daughters are looking forward to this." Karen stepped sideways, blocking the entrance with her body. "Sir, if you continue to speak to me with this tone, I'll have to involve security. We have a zero-tolerance policy for aggressive passengers." Aggressive? He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved, hadn't even frowned. But somehow, she was the victim now? Zoe's hand was shaking in mine. She leaned into Dad's leg, trying to hide her face. "Are we going to get arrested?" she asked softly. "No, baby," he whispered, kneeling beside us. "We're not in trouble." His voice cracked just a little. "I just wanted to fly," Zoe said, her voice breaking. "And me?" I was trying not to cry, not because I was scared, but because I felt something breaking. Something I didn't have a name for. Like the world I thought I knew wasn't real. Like magic didn't matter if you looked a certain way. Karen had already grabbed the cabin phone. "I have a situation at the front," she said into it, loud and dramatic. "Passenger is being non-compliant. He and his family are not listed correctly, requesting security assistance." Lies. All of it. Zoe's fingers dug into mine. Dad stood back up, straight and tall. He didn't say another word, but the look in his eyes, it wasn't anger, it wasn't fear, it was disappointment. And that, somehow, felt heavier than all the rest. The silver-haired man across the aisle folded his newspaper, watching everything. Another passenger, someone with a camera around her neck, had slowly pulled out her phone. She wasn't being obvious, but I saw the red recording light. Later I'd learn her name was Jasmine. Later I'd learn her voice would carry ours around the world. But right then, I just stood there. A 10-year-old girl in a sky blue jumpsuit, in front of a plane that was supposed to be mine, with a birthday bracelet that suddenly felt like a joke. The bracelet said, "The sky is yours." But at that moment, I didn't believe it. Not anymore. Dad didn't yell. He didn't argue or try to push past her. He didn't raise his voice or demand to see a supervisor. That would have been easier, maybe. More expected. But instead, he just let out a slow breath and said, "Let's step aside." His voice was quiet, but it felt heavier than if he'd screamed. Karen turned her back without another word, still clutching the phone like it was a weapon. Dad took my hand and Zoe's and guided us a few steps back, toward the corner where the galley ended and the first-class cabin began. It was a small, awkward space, barely wide enough for the three of us. But suddenly, it felt like the only safe place left on the plane. "I want to go home," Zoe whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. My throat felt tight, like if I said anything, it would crack me open. Across the aisle, the silver-haired man hadn't moved. Jasmine, the woman with the camera, was still pretending to scroll on her phone, but her eyes were on Karen. And me? I slid my fingers along my left wrist until I felt the tiny side button of my smartwatch. 2 taps. Then 1 longer press. A soft vibration let me know. Recording started. I didn't even think about it. It was instinct. Maybe from watching all those documentaries Dad liked. Maybe from seeing how fast truth gets erased when no one's watching. I just knew. Something had to remember this. Karen was still talking, but quieter now, turned away from us as she muttered into the cabin phone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. Urgent, offended, righteous. She was spinning the story, making herself the hero. Then something else caught my eye. Just behind Karen, near the beverage cart, a flight attendant stood frozen. He was young, maybe college age, with a buzzed haircut and nervous energy. His hand twitched slightly at his sides. His badge said Ethan. He looked upset, not like Karen, not smug or angry, just caught. For a moment, his eyes met mine, then Zoe's, then Dad's. He took a tiny step forward. Then Karen turned around. "You," she snapped. "Go prep the back galley, now." Ethan flinched. I said now, Ethan. This is above your pay grade. Don't insert yourself." There it was, the threat. His mouth opened, then closed. Then, without another word, he turned and disappeared down the aisle. Dad noticed. Of course he did. He didn't say anything, though. Just leaned against the wall with one arm draped protectively around us, eyes focused on a point far beyond the cabin. Maybe the window. Maybe the sky we still hadn't reached. "This isn't about us," he said softly. "It's about something that was broken long before we got here." I didn't know exactly what he meant, but I felt the weight of it. A few minutes passed, long, quiet ones. I could still feel the recorder humming softly on my wrist. Every word, every silence, every shift in energy. It was all being saved. And then, the tone of the plane changed. People were whispering now, the kind of hush that spreads in churches and funerals, a kind of reverent dread. Even the ones who'd tried to ignore us were sneaking glances now, some with pity, some with annoyance, some just curious, like we were animals in a zoo. I hated it. A child shouldn't have to feel studied. "Are we still flying?" Zoe asked, her voice small. Dad crouched down to her level and nodded. "We are, but we may need to be patient first." "But why is she doing this?" she asked. "We didn't do anything wrong." I waited for the answer, the one that would make sense of it. But Dad didn't say anything. And that silence? It hurt more than anything Karen had said, because I knew the answer. Deep down, I did. I'd read enough books, heard enough stories, felt the sting of certain looks, certain questions. The answer was the one people don't like saying out loud, the one that makes grown-ups uncomfortable, the one that follows us everywhere, even into the sky. Still, Dad didn't explain. He just reached out and adjusted Zoe's headband gently, brushing her curls behind her ear. Then he stood, tall and quiet again. Another few minutes passed. Then Karen's voice rose, louder now. "They're sending someone from the gate," she said to no one in particular, though everyone could hear, "to confirm the manifest and evaluate the situation." Evaluate the situation, like we were a threat. Then she glanced at us, just once, and smirked. I wished I had superpowers. Not to fly or lift things, just to erase people like her, or at least erase the way she made me feel. My watch buzzed again, battery at 75%, still recording. Jasmine shifted in her seat and raised her phone slightly. Just enough. I caught the movement out of the corner of my eye. She saw me watching. Then, barely, she nodded. Same as the man in 3A had earlier. A different kind of nod this time. Not pity, not warning, but solidarity. We were being seen, not just watched, seen. The kind of seeing that matters. Behind us, passengers were beginning to murmur louder. Someone called for a drink. Another adjusted their overhead bag. It was as if the moment was stretching, rubber band tight. Something had to snap soon. Karen checked her watch. Zoe leaned her head against Dad's side, and I stood there, bracelet cool against my wrist, smartwatch still recording, trying not to cry. Because silence may be gentle, but it hurts louder than any scream. Dad's fingers moved slowly to the inside pocket of his blazer. I watched as he pulled out his personal phone, the one he rarely used outside of work. He tapped the screen once, then again, then held it to his ear without saying a word. For a second I thought maybe he was just pretending, but then I saw the tension in his shoulders ease, just slightly. Then came the words. Simple, calm, final. "Logan, we have a problem." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. He ended the call, placed the phone back in his pocket, and looked straight ahead. Zoe clung to his arm. I kept glancing at the door, expecting someone, anyone, to show up immediately. No one came. 1 minute, then 2, then 5. Karen was pacing now, the receiver of the wall phone swinging at her side like a pendulum. Her confidence seemed to grow with each second that passed. Her smirk widened. Her voice got louder. "You see?" she muttered, not even hiding the glee in her tone. "Nothing's happening. No backup. No miracle call?" She turned back to the crew intercom. "Gate 4, this is Flight 77. I need immediate security response. Passenger is non-compliant and delaying departure." Non-compliant, delaying departure, all lies. "She's really doing this," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, still recording. My fingers numb, my wrist buzzing every now and then like a heartbeat. Karen turned back to Dad and crossed her arms. "You might think you're important, Mr. Miles, but rules are rules, and you're not above them." Dad didn't respond. His silence was louder than any reply. Zoe looked up at him like he was a mountain, immovable, steady. But even I could tell. This mountain was growing tired. 8 minutes now. Passengers were starting to fidget. Whispers, eye rolls. One woman in business attire even tapped her watch pointedly and said, "Are we boarding or not?" Karen didn't flinch. "I apologize for the delay," she said to the cabin, her voice dripping with false professionalism. "We're resolving an issue." Resolving. Like we were a technical glitch. Then, the cabin door clicked open. Everyone turned. Karen straightened up, smugness lighting up her face like Christmas lights. "Finally," she muttered under her breath. But when the figure stepped inside, her face changed instantly. It wasn't airport security. It wasn't a TSA agent. It was a tall, sharp-looking man in a navy suit, gray streaks at his temples, and a black lanyard that practically glowed with authority. His eyes scanned the cabin and locked immediately onto Dad. His walk was fast, controlled, military-like. Behind him came someone else. Jasmine. Her camera was in hand now, not hidden. She wasn't pretending anymore. She walked like she belonged, like this moment was hers. And behind them, a man I didn't recognize. Not part of the crew, not dressed like corporate. He wore a suit, but the kind that whispered money, not screamed it. And there was something in his eyes, watchful, calculating. Karen's smile faltered. "Excuse me, this is a secure, Karen Redford?" the man in the navy suit asked, pulling out a slim black ID wallet. Yes, she replied, caught off guard. "I'm Logan Brooks, Chief Operating Officer, Starlight Airlines." Silence. For a full 2 seconds, the air didn't move. Then Karen's face went pale. "COO?" she repeated. Logan nodded once. "I received a direct call from Mr. Jonathan Miles regarding an incident on board this aircraft. I'm here to assess that incident, right now." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Behind Logan, Jasmine began recording openly. I watched as her lens panned slowly across the cabin, past Karen's frozen stance, past the passengers pretending not to listen, and landed right on us. I felt naked, exposed, but also protected. Dad stepped forward, calm and steady. Logan extended a hand. "Mr. Miles." "Logan," Dad replied. They shook hands. Firm, quiet. Karen looked like she might faint. The third man stepped forward, finally speaking. "Is this the passenger who was flagged?" "Yes," Karen croaked, clearly struggling now. I had concerns about the accuracy of their boarding information." "Did you verify the information?" Logan asked coldly. I asked for ID, but I designed the ID verification protocols myself," Logan said, voice hard. There's no need to check credit cards or ID at the cabin door. That's harassment." The last word hung in the air like smoke. The silver-haired man in 3A coughed loudly and folded his arms. Jasmine zoomed in slightly. The passengers were no longer pretending not to watch. "I'll need your crew credentials, Karen," Logan said quietly. Karen didn't move. "Now." She reached into her blazer and handed over a lanyard with trembling fingers. "Please step aside," Logan continued. But I was following. I said step aside." Karen moved slowly, shrinking with every step. She tried to hold on to her dignity, but it slipped through her fingers like water. And just like that, the doorway cleared. Logan turned to us. "Mr. Miles, Ms. Miles, and Ms. Miles, please proceed to your seats." I didn't move right away, because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about flying anymore. I was thinking about power, how it could be quiet, how it could wear a calm face and carry a phone instead of a fist, how it could walk in and shift the entire temperature of a room with one sentence. Dad didn't celebrate. He just took our hands again. And together, we stepped past Karen Redford, silent, trembling, and into the first-class cabin that had always been ours. Just as we were about to step into the aisle, a voice rose from the front row. "Excuse me," it said, cool and sharp, slicing through the quiet tension like a razor. Everyone turned. From seat 1A, a pod at the very front left of first class, a tall man in a dark gray suit stood slowly, brushing off imaginary lint from his sleeve. His presence was immediate, commanding, the kind of person who entered a room and assumed everyone knew who he was. I didn't recognize him, but Dad did. His jaw tightened just enough for me to notice. Zoe clutched his hand again. I felt her body stiffen beside me. "Jonathan Miles," the man said, voice full of mock surprise. "Fancy meeting you here." Dad said nothing. "I suppose it wouldn't be a Starlight flight without a little drama," the man continued, then turned to Logan. "Mr. Brooks, if I may have a moment." Logan hesitated. Senator Whitaker. That name meant nothing to me at first, but I would remember it forever. Senator Graham Whitaker, a man whose face had been in headlines, a man who had once chaired a powerful transportation committee, a man who had, according to Dad's quiet conversations in the kitchen late at night, tried to bury the aviation reform bill Jonathan had helped write, and a man who, as Dad had once said in a whisper, isn't half as clean as his suits. "I feel compelled to say something here," Whitaker said, turning now to the cabin full of watching eyes. "This gentleman, Mr. Miles, has a long-standing vendetta against me. Personal, political, you name it. I can't speak to the full context of this situation, but I can say this. I have been seated in 1A on dozens of Starlight flights. I know the process. I know the manifest system. I've watched this crew operate before." Karen, still frozen near the bulkhead, looked up suddenly, hope flickering back into her eyes. "This flight attendant," he said, gesturing to her, "has always been professional, and as far as I can see, she was simply following the rules." He let the silence stretch. "I'm not saying anything improper happened," he continued smoothly, "but I'd be remiss if I didn't raise the possibility that Mr. Miles may be using his influence to manipulate this situation. I mean, I didn't see any boarding passes. Did you?" He looked around as if expecting agreement. "I'll testify if necessary," Whitaker added. "I believe in fairness and due process." My ears rang. I couldn't breathe. Zoe's fingers trembled in mine. It felt like we had just climbed out of the hole, and someone had shoved us back in, twice as deep. I turned to Jasmine. She had lowered her phone slightly, frowning. Not confused, not convinced, just wary. Logan's expression had changed too. Still composed, but no longer certain. Karen was standing straighter now. And Dad? He didn't even blink. With calm, almost detached precision, he reached into his blazer and pulled out the boarding passes again. One by one, he handed them to Logan. "Seats 2A, 2BM, and 2C, he said flatly. "All verified. Purchased using the Starlight Centurion card. My name, My children's names. Manifest check this morning." Logan examined them, his brow furrowed. Then he turned to Karen. "These look clean. Why weren't they accepted?" Karen sputtered. They looked unusual. I was just being cautious. I thought," Whitaker interrupted. "I'm just saying, this man has tried to sabotage my career before. He's a known critic of the system. He's used underhanded tactics." Dad's voice cut through like steel. "Senator Whitaker is under active investigation by the FAA for funneling federal contracts to a private vendor he secretly owns," Dad said evenly. "A vendor that failed 4 safety audits last year. I submitted the whistleblower report myself." A ripple moved through the cabin. Someone gasped. Even Logan's eyes widened. Whitaker flushed. "That's unsubstantiated. You're just trying to cover for your overreaction here." "Actually," Jasmine spoke up for the first time, "the investigation went public yesterday. I was going to ask you for comment after the flight." Whitaker turned to her, his mask cracking for the first time. You're recording?" Jasmine didn't even flinch. "Every second, including the part where you just tried to obstruct a discrimination case by leveraging your political status." Karen took a step back. Passengers were whispering now, no longer just watching, but reacting. The tide was turning again, fast. "Senator," Logan said slowly, "if you have any further concerns, I suggest you direct them to our legal team. For now, I'd appreciate if you return to your seat." Whitaker's lips pressed into a thin, colorless line, but he sat. Quietly. Karen, now pale and shaking, opened her mouth as if to speak. But no words came. Dad finally turned to her. "We were here. We were patient. We were quiet. You decided we didn't belong. You made that call." He looked around the cabin, then back to her. "You weren't wrong," he added, voice like ice. "We don't belong in a place where people like you get to decide who deserves to be treated with respect." Then he stepped forward. "Girls," he said. We followed. Past Karen, past Whitaker, past the quiet stairs, toward the seats that had always been ours. And in my wrist, the watch kept recording. Because justice wasn't done yet. Not even close. We were just settling into our seats. Zoe by the window, me in the middle, Dad on the aisle, when the murmurs behind us began to rise. Not whispers anymore, not background noise. It was that kind of buzz that meant something had changed, something big. Then I saw her. Jasmine. She had walked to the center of the cabin, no longer just an observer. The camera wasn't tucked away anymore. It was on, front-facing, ready. Her eyes were calm but focused like a surgeon about to make a single, precise cut. "I'd like to show something," she said loudly, to the entire cabin. Karen, still standing awkwardly by the jump seat, flinched. Whitaker looked up, frowning. Logan stepped forward but didn't stop her. "This footage was recorded less than 10 minutes ago," Jasmine continued, "with audio, visual, all from my seat. It shows what happened at this door when the Miles family attempted to board." Passengers turned in their seats. Someone from row 5 actually stood up to watch. Jasmine tapped her phone, connected it wirelessly to the cabin screen normally used for safety videos. And just like that, the past became present. There we were, on screen. Dad smiling politely, Karen crossing her arms. Her words, clear, sharp, poisonous. "These seats aren't for you. You might have gotten confused on the jet bridge. I'll need to see the credit card. These tickets are often obtained fraudulently." Every sentence hit harder when heard from outside yourself. The cabin was dead silent. Then came Karen's last line, before Dad stepped aside. "2 excited children in this cabin would be disruptive. It's not fair to the other passengers." Gasps. Audible now. A woman in row 2 covered her mouth. A man near the back shook his head. Karen's face was frozen, eyes wide, lips trembling. Then Jasmine's voice again, clear, calm. "That was less than 10 minutes ago, in front of witnesses, and on camera." Before anyone could speak, I reached over and tapped my watch. "I have something too," I said quietly. Then louder. I was recording the whole time, from the moment she blocked us. Dad looked at me, surprised, then proud. Logan stepped closer. "May I?" I tapped the screen, sent the audio file to the screen system. Within seconds, the cabin was filled with Karen's voice, again, this time from my perspective. But now, there was more, because the recording continued and included Senator Whitaker's entire speech about us not having proper documents, how he didn't see any boarding passes, how he knew the process better than anyone. Then Jasmine's voice replying, "Actually, the investigation went public yesterday." Then, the cabin gasped again, because hearing it again, unfiltered, unedited, made everything unforgivable. Logan turned toward Karen. "You told me you never denied them boarding. You said you were merely verifying." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Whitaker stood, blustering. "This is out of context. She was doing her job." And that's when he stepped out from behind the galley curtain. Ethan, the young flight attendant, his face pale but determined. "I need to say something," he said, voice shaking slightly. Logan blinked. "Go ahead." Ethan looked straight at Karen. "You told me to stay out of it, that if I said anything I could lose my job." Karen's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. "But I know who they are," Ethan continued, turning to the cabin. "I've worked Starlight executive flights. I've seen Mr. Miles. He's been to our corporate briefings. He owns this airline." Another wave of shock hit the passengers. And still, Ethan wasn't done. "I've also seen Ms. Redford, more than once, deny upgrades to passengers who look different. She always says it's about policy, but it's always the same kind of passenger." Karen stepped forward, her voice trembling with rage. "That's a lie!" But the crowd wasn't with her anymore. No one looked at her with sympathy now, only disbelief. And something more dangerous, contempt. Jasmine turned off the screen. "I'll be submitting the full footage to the FAA and DOT," she said coolly, "as well as uploading a public version online, with faces blurred where appropriate." Logan took a long breath, then turned to the intercom, lifted it, and spoke into the cabin. "This is Logan Brooks. I want to formally apologize on behalf of Starlight Airlines. What you witnessed today is unacceptable. We are addressing it in real time, and it will not go unanswered." He hung up, turned to Karen. "Your badge. Now." She hesitated. For half a second I thought she might run, but there was nowhere to go. With shaking hands, she unhooked her lanyard and handed it over. "You'll be met at the gate," Logan said simply. "Do not speak to passengers. Do not return to the cabin." Karen walked down the aisle, alone, head low, shoulders slumped. Her authority stripped away, not with shouting, but with proof. And as she disappeared through the cabin door, a strange silence followed her. Then, from somewhere near the back, a slow, soft clap. Another joined, and another. Not wild applause, just enough. A quiet chorus of truth being recognized. Jasmine sat back down. Ethan returned to the galley, where another crew member, an older woman, touched his shoulder gently. Zoe looked at me, eyes still watery, but glowing. "And Dad?" He exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. We weren't just passengers anymore. We were witnesses. We were proof. And the camera never lied. The cabin had barely begun to breathe again when Logan's phone buzzed. He stepped away, speaking softly into it, his face tight with whatever update was coming through. Dad sat in silence, one hand resting on his knee, the other gently covering Zoe's. I watched the back of his head and thought, he knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Logan returned after a moment, his expression unreadable. He walked to the center of the aisle, cleared his throat, and looked at Dad. "Jonathan," he said carefully, "I just got confirmation from our operations database. There's something you need to see." Dad stood. "Go ahead." Logan held up his tablet, already pulled to a passenger seat manifest. This is the original first-class seating assignment as of 4 a.m. today. He tapped once. Seat 1A, Jonathan Miles. Seat 2A, Chloe Miles. Seat 2B, Zoe Miles. Seat 2C, reserved for accompanying guardian. I blinked, confused. Wait, Dad was supposed to be in 1A. Logan continued. This version was logged into our main system. However, he swiped again, revealing a second manifest. This is the one synced with the crew tablet 1 hour before boarding. Now it read, Seat 1A, Senator Graham Whitaker. Seat 2A, Chloe Miles. Seat 2B, Zoe Miles. Seat 2C, Jonathan Miles. Zoe whispered, "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, stunned, "that Dad's seat was stolen." Dad's eyes narrowed. "Who made the change?" Logan took a breath. Only one person had admin access to the manifest at that hour. The cabin lead assigned to Flight 277. He didn't have to say her name. Everyone in the cabin knew. Karen Redford. A new kind of silence fell over the plane, one with edges, sharp ones. "She reassigned your seat," Logan confirmed. "Without authorization, gave it to Senator Whitaker." Jasmine, who had been quietly reviewing her footage again, looked up fast. "Are you saying she manually altered the seating?" "Yes." "Why?" someone asked from the cabin behind us. Ethan, the young flight attendant, stepped forward again. "She was bragging about it earlier, said something like, 'Senator Whitaker deserves better than some corporate hotshot and his loud kids up front.' I didn't think she meant she changed the seat assignment. But now," his voice trailed off. Jasmine turned her camera back on. "Let me get this straight," she said, her voice cool and precise. "Not only did she deny entry to a black family with valid boarding passes, not only did she fabricate a security risk and attempt to call law enforcement, but she also tampered with official airline data to prioritize a political figure. The ripple that passed through the passengers wasn't a murmur. It was a wave. "She stole his seat?" someone repeated aloud. "That's insane." "Is that even legal?" another asked. Logan looked furious now, but in that quiet executive way where his words were even softer than before. "It's a federal offense to manipulate secured passenger data." Senator Whitaker, still planted in 1A, shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't aware." Logan cut him off. "Did you ask for this seat?" Whitaker hesitated. "No, I was surprised to be upgraded. I assumed it was standard." "Did you question why a family was being denied boarding in your name?" Whitaker didn't answer. Zoe stared at him, her eyes filled with something I'd never seen from her before. Not sadness, not fear, disgust. And me, I felt hot all over. Not just mad, violated. That seat was supposed to be Dad's. It was ours. This entire situation had been built on a lie she created, a web spun to accommodate someone she thought was worth more than us, more than the truth, more than integrity. "She thought no one would notice," Jasmine said, "because she assumed no one would care." Dad finally spoke. "That seat doesn't matter to me, not anymore." He looked at Logan. "What matters is that she was willing to manipulate a system that affects safety and trust for every passenger on board, just to serve her bias." He turned to Whitaker. "And that you were willing to weaponize your reputation to support her lie." For once, the senator had nothing to say. Jasmine's camera caught it all. Every inch of shame, every flicker of realization. Then Dad looked back at Logan. "I want a full audit of the flight logs, passenger data, internal messages, and I want that seat assignment change reported directly to the FAA." "It will be," Logan said, grim, "along with a formal report from corporate legal. And I want this entire cabin to know something," Dad added, louder now, addressing the passengers who had watched the drama unfold like a movie. "This isn't about me being the owner of an airline. This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. Because if it can happen to me, someone with access, with status, it can happen to any of you." A hush fell again, but this one felt different. It wasn't fear anymore. It was understanding, awareness, even empathy. The man in seat 3A, the silver-haired one, nodded again. Then, softly, he clapped. Once, twice. Then others joined. A ripple, not loud, but real. And Senator Whitaker? He looked down at his shoes. Defeated. Dad sat back beside us, calm again. Zoe leaned on his arm. I turned off the recorder on my watch. It had captured everything. But it wasn't the data that mattered anymore. It was what people did with it. And the truth? It had already taken flight. The plane felt different now. Heavier somehow, though it hadn't left the ground. Not physically. But in the air, in the energy around us, something monumental had shifted. There was no applause this time. No outburst. Just a silence so charged it could split glass. Logan Brooks, the COO of Starlight Airlines, stood at the front of the cabin holding Karen's crew badge in one hand like it was radioactive. His expression was unreadable, but there was something about the way he clenched his jaw that told everyone in the room, "This ends now." "Karen Redford," he said, voice cutting clear through the thick quiet. "You are officially suspended, effective immediately. You will not continue on this flight, or any flight until further notice. A corporate security representative will meet you at the gate." Karen blinked. Once. Twice. Then she took a half step back like the floor had shifted beneath her. This is a misunderstanding. Senator Whitaker." Logan raised a hand. "This is not about the senator. This is about your choices. Your abuse of protocol, your manipulation of passenger data, your blatant disregard for equity and ethics, and the damage you've just done to yourself, to this crew, and to this company is not something that will be brushed away with a few excuses." Jasmine captured every word. Her camera never wavered. Karen's mouth opened again, but this time, no sound came. Then, slowly, she reached up, removed her flight pin, and placed it in Logan's open palm. When she turned, there was no swagger left. She walked down the aisle, her shoes quiet on the carpet. The passengers parted like water before her. No one met her eyes. No one stopped her. She passed our row without a glance. Zoe held my hand tightly. Karen reached the cabin door, and without ceremony, stepped out into the jet bridge, the door closing behind her with a soft, definitive click. Gone. Just like that. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Logan turned again, this time to the man still seated in 1A. "Senator Whitaker," he said, measured and formal. "Under our passenger rights policy, and in light of your willful misrepresentation of the truth during an ongoing discrimination complaint, we are exercising our right to deny you further service on this flight." Gasps again. Not just from passengers this time, but from crew. Even Ethan, standing quietly near the galley, looked stunned. Whitaker stood slowly. His face was red now, not from power, but from exposure. "This is ridiculous," he growled. "You're making a spectacle. You're throwing away protocol for optics. I'll be speaking to your board, your shareholders, your union." "You're welcome to do so," Logan said. "But first, I suggest you exit the aircraft." A pause. Then Whitaker leaned down, grabbed his briefcase with a trembling hand, and stalked down the aisle, fury in every step. No one applauded. No one had to. The silence was louder than any cheer could have been. He stopped once near us, as if preparing to say something to Dad, but then thought better of it. His eyes met mine for half a second. I didn't flinch. Neither did Zoe. Then he turned and vanished. And just like that, the balance of the flight changed, like the air had cleared, like something poisonous had been sucked out of the vents and replaced with something clean. Logan took a breath. "On behalf of Starlight," he said to the cabin, "I again apologize for what you've witnessed today. It does not reflect our values, and I promise it will be addressed at every level." He looked at Dad. "I'm sorry," he added, quieter now. "You deserved better." Dad gave a small nod. We all did. With that, Logan left the cabin as well. back through the front door, presumably to deal with the fallout that was already erupting beyond the fuselage. The rest of the passengers settled slowly, as if recovering from whiplash. Flight attendants resumed their positions. Ethan gave us a soft smile before walking toward the galley. The silver-haired man in 3A finally opened his laptop, though I noticed he didn't start typing. Jasmine approached our row once more, still holding her camera. "May I?" she asked Dad. He nodded. She looked at us. "I just wanted to say thank you for staying calm, for letting the truth speak." Zoe looked shyly up at her. "Are you going to put the video online?" "I already did," Jasmine replied. "The full version's uploading now. I've tagged the airline, the FAA, the Senate Ethics Committee, and a few media friends." Then she smiled. "It's going to be seen, not just viral, visible." "What's the difference?" I asked. "Viral is when people share something. Visible," she said, "is when they actually see it." She turned and returned to her seat. "And Dad?" He finally exhaled. Then, calmly, with that same quiet strength that had carried us through every moment, he said, "Girls, let's sit down." We did. The cabin crew came around again, this time softer, more attentive. One offered Zoe a blanket. Another brought me a little glass of apple juice and a cookie. Ethan stopped by again. "You okay?" he asked. "We will be," Dad replied. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during our boarding process. We've had a few unexpected adjustments, but we're ready for departure." He paused. "And I'd like to personally thank a few passengers who reminded us all today what courage and integrity look like." I looked out the window as the engines began to hum. The plane moved. Slowly at first, then faster. I turned to Dad. "Do you think people will believe the video?" He looked down at me. "They'll believe what they want," he said. "But the truth doesn't need belief. It just needs to exist." Then he added, "And we've made sure it does." As the plane took off, lifting above the tarmac, into the clouds, into the quiet, I held Zoe's hand. We didn't say anything. We didn't need to. Justice had come. Not through shouting, not through revenge, but through truth, carried on quiet voices and unshaking hands. And now the world would see it, for the first time, and all over again. It started small. A few comments under Jasmine's post, a couple of shares, a handful of people saying, "I can't believe this happened." Then, it exploded. By the time we touched down in New York, the plane's Wi-Fi had already carried the video to every corner of the internet. Jasmine's post, captioned simply, "What happened to this family is not rare, but today it was recorded," had reached over 2 million views. Within another hour, it would double, and then triple. Within 24 hours, the world knew who we were, not because we wanted them to, but because truth, once set loose, doesn't ask for permission. The next morning, while we sat quietly in the hotel suite, our faces still soft from exhaustion, Dad handed us an iPad. "Someone wants to thank you," he said. We scrolled. The screen was filled with letters, DMs, emails, comments. Some were angry, at the system, at Karen, at how often this still happened in silence. But most of them, gratitude. A girl in Texas who wrote, "I'm the only black kid in my school. Watching you stand tall helped me feel less invisible." A teacher in Toronto, "I showed your video to my class today. My students were stunned. We had the most honest conversation about race we've ever had." A retired flight attendant, tears visible on a shaky video she posted from her living room, saying, "My daughter was denied boarding 10 years ago because they didn't think a single black mom could afford business class. I never spoke up. I should have. But today, you did." We kept reading. Each word felt like both a weight and a wing, heavy with emotion, but lifting us higher. I didn't know what to say. Then Zoe gasped. "Look at this one," she said. It was a photo. A handwritten letter on lined notebook paper. The writing was loopy and slightly crooked. From a child, clearly. Dear Chloe, my name is Hannah. I'm 10 too. My daddy said those girls on the plane were lying. He said people make things up to get attention. But then my mom showed me the video, and I watched your face, and your sisters, and your dad, and I knew my daddy was wrong. I'm sorry. I believe you. Love, Hannah. My throat tightened. I read it again, then again, and each time the words felt heavier, not because they were hateful, but because they were honest. Zoe was crying now, silently, the good kind, the kind that says something broke through. Dad sat between us, one arm around each of our shoulders. This, he said softly, is why we spoke up. Not for revenge, but for this. For Hannah. For all the Hannahs. Later that week, the media requests came in waves. Morning shows, news channels, podcasts. Most we declined. Dad didn't want our faces on billboards or magazine covers. He said we weren't influencers. We were just kids who lived through something they shouldn't have had to. But we agreed to one interview. Just one. With a small independent journalist who flew all the way from Atlanta just to speak with us in our hotel's meeting room. She didn't ask us to cry. She didn't poke for pain. She just listened. What would you say, she asked gently, to kids going through something like this but don't know how to speak up? Zoe looked at me. Then I said, you don't have to yell to be heard. You just have to tell the truth. She smiled. Zoe added, and sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who think they're helping someone else. The journalist nodded, then turned off her recorder. Before she left, she hugged us both. Thank you, she whispered, for being brave enough to let the world see you. Back at school, things were different. Kids stared a little longer. Some teachers pulled us aside just to say, welcome back, in a tone that felt extra careful. We didn't blame them. The whole world had changed for us. It made sense that our school would feel different too. But then, during lunch, a boy from another class came over. He looked nervous. I'm supposed to give you this, he said, handing me an envelope. I opened it. Inside was another letter, this time typed. It was from a teacher in Ohio. He had assigned an essay to his class. What would you do if you saw someone being treated unfairly? Dozens of responses. All of them mentioned us, not famous athletes, not superheroes. Us, Chloe and Zoe Miles, flying while black. But flying anyway. That night, back at the hotel, Dad showed us a video. It was Jasmine again, this time being interviewed on national TV. This wasn't just a racial incident, she said calmly. It was a structural one. The flight attendant didn't just act on bias. She used power. She altered records. She manipulated a system she thought would protect her, and for once, it didn't. The host leaned in. Why do you think the video resonated so deeply? Jasmine paused. Then, because the girls didn't scream. They didn't rage. They didn't curse. They stood still. They waited. They watched. And in that stillness, the world saw something it couldn't unsee. The host nodded. And what do you think happens next? Jasmine smiled. I think the sky just got a little wider. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared out the hotel window at the lights of the city, trying to imagine all the people who had seen our faces, who had written letters, who had changed their minds. And I thought of Hannah, a little white girl, same age as me, somewhere out there holding a pencil and writing what her father couldn't say. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the plane. Not pride, not victory, just hope that maybe, just maybe, the world could still change. One video, one voice, one truth at a time. The hotel room was quiet. Almost too quiet. Outside, New York buzzed like it always did. Sirens in the distance, muffled horns, the low hum of a city that never stops moving. But inside, it was still. Zoe had fallen asleep curled up on the couch with her sketch pad open across her stomach. She'd drawn a cloud again, this one with cracks running through it, like lightning had shattered the sky but never quite broken it. Dad sat by the window, staring out, unmoving. He wasn't checking his phone, wasn't reading, just watching. I didn't speak at first. I just watched him. There was something different in his posture, like the weight that had been on him all week had settled deeper, like the victory, if you could call it that, hadn't lightened him, but pressed down in a different way. Finally, I broke the silence. "You okay?" He didn't look at me. "No," he said. Not unkindly, just honest. I sat down beside him, letting my feet dangle. We watched the lights for a while. Then he spoke again. "I should have done this years ago." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his short salt and pepper hair, a rare, nervous gesture for him. "Before you were born," he said slowly, "your mom and I took a flight to Atlanta. Just a quick business trip. We were both dressed nice. We had first-class tickets. We'd booked them together. Same last name, same reservation code. But when we got to the gate, the attendant scanned my ticket and let me through, and stopped her. I blinked. She asked my wife for ID, then her confirmation email, then said the seat must have been double booked, tried to send her to the back of the plane. I couldn't believe it. "What did you do?" He looked at me then, and his eyes were tired in a way I'd never seen before. I didn't say anything. I stared. "I was shocked," he continued. "I didn't want to make a scene. I told myself it would escalate, that we'd missed the flight, that I could fix it later." He paused. "Eventually I spoke to the gate supervisor, got it sorted out. But I never told anyone, never filed a complaint, never followed up." "Did Mom?" I asked, my voice quieter. "She asked me not to," he said. "She was tired. She just wanted to get where we were going." He exhaled, eyes distant now. But I knew what it was, and I let it go. I sat still, unsure of what to say. "She deserved better," he said. "And you two, you deserved a father who'd already learned this lesson." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "She'd be proud of you now," I whispered. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he wasn't sure. "She always said," he murmured, "every time we don't speak up, we make it easier for the next person to stay quiet too." I looked at Zoe, still sleeping, still curled around her sketchbook like it was armor. "What made you speak up this time?" I asked. He gave a small smile, more sorrow than warmth. "You? What do you mean?" That moment, when Karen said those words, when she blocked the doorway. "I looked at you, Chloe. You were holding your sister's hand like she'd fall apart without it, and I saw your face, and I knew, if I didn't say something now, you'd learn the same silence I had. That silence, the one that follows you, shapes you, bends your spine and teaches you to shrink." "I wasn't brave," he said. "I was guilty." I shook my head. "You were both." He looked at me. "Guilt made you speak," I said. "But bravery kept you standing." We sat like that for a while longer. I thought about how many other stories were like Mom's, ones that never made it to a screen, never went viral, just faded into someone's past like static. And I wondered how many people right now were sitting in a seat that wasn't meant for them, or being told they didn't belong, or staying quiet, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't believe speaking would matter. "Do you think she forgave you?" I asked quietly. "I think," he said, voice soft, "she'd have forgiven me sooner than I forgave myself." Then he added, "But this, what we've done now, this was for her too." The lights of the city blurred a little behind the glass. Dad stood and walked to the couch, gently lifting Zoe and carrying her to bed. She stirred, but didn't wake, just whispered something in her sleep that sounded like "fly." When he returned, he paused in the hallway, looking at a framed photo on the side table. It was Mom, smiling, holding us when we were just babies. He touched the edge of the frame with one finger. Then he whispered something so soft I barely caught it. "I'm sorry I didn't speak louder." The next morning, I found that same picture packed in his carry-on. wrapped carefully between a laptop and a bundle of papers. He didn't need to say why. He was taking her with us now, the way she should have always been. The gallery smelled like varnish and dried glue, the air filled with whispers and the squeak of 2 clean shoes on polished floors. It was a children's art exhibit, but everything about the room felt strangely grown up. Maybe it was the lighting, or maybe it was the fact that every piece on the wall had been made by someone who'd already seen more of the world than they should have. Zoe stood beside me, clutching her notebook. She'd been quiet all morning. Not the sleepy kind of quiet, but the reflective kind. The kind where I knew not to fill the silence. Dad had brought us here because one of Zoe's paintings had made the final round of judging. A soft watercolor titled "No Fence in the Sky." 2 little girls floating with kites, no strings, no ground beneath them. It was beautiful. She'd painted it in the hotel the night after our flight. But when we walked through the final hall of winning works, it wasn't Zoe's that made us stop. It was the one in the center, a huge canvas, almost floor to ceiling, titled in clean block letters, "Empty Sky." It was abstract at first glance, gray tones bleeding into blues, swirls of white that seemed both soft and violent at once, and in the upper right corner, a jagged streak of black, like someone had taken a blade to the canvas and then tried to cover it with stormlight. It was haunting, and somehow familiar. "Is that?" Zoe's voice broke off. I looked at the card beside the painting. There was no full name, just K. Redford. My breath caught. Zoe didn't move. Neither did I. We stood there for a long time, and then the exhibit guide. A young woman with a bright scarf and kind eyes stepped closer. "You girls like this one?" Zoe nodded. The guide smiled. It was painted by one of our anonymous adult contributors. The contest was open to children, but we had a few pieces donated by adult artists who support the program. She didn't want recognition, just asked that the piece be included as a personal apology to the sky. I felt something shift in my chest. A weight I didn't know I was carrying moved. Just a little. "She volunteers at a shelter in the Bronx," the woman added. "Quiet lady, doesn't say much, brings soup, paints when no one's watching. Kind of disappeared from her last job, I heard. Found her way to us through someone she helped." Zoe reached out, lightly touching the air just in front of the painting. "It's sad," she whispered. "But honest," I said. Dad came up behind us, saw the title, saw the initials, and didn't ask. He just stood with us. We didn't talk about what it meant. We didn't need to. We knew. Later that afternoon, when most visitors had left, we asked if we could leave a note. The guide gave us a little card and a pen. Zoe wrote the words slowly. "Thank you for the sky, for breaking it and showing us we could still fly." Zoe and Chloe. We left it tucked in the corner of the frame, hidden from easy view, visible only if someone really looked. We didn't write, "We forgive you." That wasn't ours to give. Forgiveness isn't always a ribbon you hand to someone when they say sorry. Sometimes it's the silence you offer instead of a curse. Sometimes it's the way you walk away, whole, while they still carry what they broke. That night, Zoe and I sat by the hotel window again, looking at the dark skyline. "She didn't sign her name," Zoe said. "No," I said. "But she didn't need to. She looked at us like we didn't belong," she continued. "And now she's feeding strangers with soup and art," I said. "Maybe she didn't belong there either." Zoe turned to me. "Do you think she's sorry?" "I think she's becoming sorry," I said. Zoe tilted her head. "Can you become sorry if you never say it?" I thought about that. "I think sometimes saying it makes it easier," I said. "But sometimes, the hard part is living with it." The next morning, we got an email from the exhibit director. Subject: winner announced Zoe's painting hadn't won. But she didn't seem disappointed. Because in the hallway where they displayed the honorable mentions, there was a photo of her piece next to "Empty Sky." Not competing, just together. A caption beneath both read, "When skies break, sometimes it takes 2 views to see the whole picture." And that was better than any ribbon. Later that week, back home in California, we visited Mom's favorite beach, the one she used to call her quiet place. We brought the printed copy of Empty Sky with us. Zoe laid it down in the sand and placed a small white stone on top. We didn't say anything because we didn't need permission to forgive. We didn't need closure or confessions or neatly tied endings. We had truth. We had healing. We had each other. And now, we had the sky again. The room was filled with light, not from chandeliers or spotlights, but from the kind that comes through tall windows and rests gently on people's shoulders. Warm, inviting, soft. It was the kind of light that didn't demand attention, but made you want to stay. Hundreds of people filled the seats. Community leaders, journalists, parents, students, volunteers. The front row was a blend of CEOs and janitors, senators and school teachers. No hierarchy, just people. At the center of the stage stood a new sign, freshly unveiled. The Miles Center for Human Dignity. Behind it, a curved screen glowed, ready to show a story. Not a brand campaign, not a launch trailer, but a story. Ours. Dad didn't speak first. In fact, he didn't speak at all. He stood off to the side of the stage, in a navy suit that made him look like every other executive in the room, until you noticed his eyes. The ones that had seen too much, waited too long, and now watched from the sidelines with quiet fire. He wanted the stage to belong to us, to Chloe and Zoe, to the daughters who had once been blocked at a boarding door and now stood before a world they were helping to rebuild. Zoe and I walked to the microphone together, no speech in hand, just hearts in sync. "Thank you for being here," I began. "And thank you for listening, not just to us, but to everything that's been shared since the day our names became hashtags." Zoe took over seamlessly. "We've heard so many people say, 'You girls were brave,' and we're grateful for that. But bravery wasn't the goal. Dignity was." I nodded. We didn't want to be symbols, or lessons, or headlines. We just wanted to sit in the seats our father paid for. Zoe paused. Her voice softened. "We're not asking for applause. We're asking for something quieter, but stronger." Then, together, we said, "We don't need claps. We just need to know that no other child will be stopped at the gate we were told wasn't ours." There was silence. Not the awkward kind, the sacred kind, the kind that follows truth. Then the screen behind us lit up. A video began to play. It wasn't us on screen, not the flight, not the interviews. It was a quiet room in a community center. The camera was handheld, slightly shaky, capturing a woman ladling soup into bowls for a group of children. Her apron was stained, her hair tied back. She wasn't talking to the camera. She wasn't even aware of it. Karen. The room didn't gasp, didn't recoil. It breathed. She moved slowly, gently, kneeling beside a child who had dropped his spoon. Smiled at a toddler who reached out to touch her hand. She was different, not unrecognizable, but softened, smaller, human. A voiceover, not hers, explained, "Karen Redford now volunteers 5 days a week at the Sunrise Shelter for Youth. She's requested no interviews, no payments, no defense, just the space to show up, do the work, and disappear." And then the screen faded to black, leaving only the words, "Some apologies are louder when whispered." The audience didn't clap, not at first, because some moments don't need noise. They need space, room to sink into the soul and sit there for a while. Dad stepped forward then, not to the microphone, but to us. He placed a hand on each of our shoulders and looked out at the crowd. And for the first time, I saw him as more than our father. I saw him as the man who had once stayed silent, who had chosen to speak, and who now let his daughters carry the microphone because he'd already said enough. We left the stage without a standing ovation, but as we passed through the aisle, people stood anyway, one by one, not clapping, just rising, heads bowed slightly, hands over hearts, as if witnessing something sacred. Outside, the sun was setting behind the center's new sign. Its letters glowed gold against the stone, solid, timeless. A small crowd gathered by the entrance mural. A painting of a boarding gate, wide open, with dozens of children walking through it. Every race, every height, every dream tucked under their arms like carry-on bags. At the top, painted in cursive across the clouds, "The sky is big enough for all of us." I saw Hannah there. Yes, that Hannah. The girl who'd once written to us about her father and her apology. She had flown in with her mother, holding a notebook and a heart too big for her tiny frame. She didn't ask for a picture, she just said, "Thank you for teaching me how to see." Zoe gave her a hug, and I gave her the bracelet from my wrist, the one that still read, "The sky is yours." Later that evening, as we sat in the quiet courtyard behind the center, Dad handed us each a copy of a letter. His voice was quiet. "I wrote this last night. For your mom." We opened them slowly. Inside was the same message. "I couldn't protect you then, but I'm building something now that will protect others. In your name. And in theirs." Zoe leaned her head on his shoulder. I took his hand. And for the first time since everything began, not just since the flight, but since the silence before it, I felt something take off. Not a plane, not a movement, but us. Free, quiet, and finally, soaring.